for all. Changes occur in his life when he finally awakens his own quirk.
What if Izuku had a bone manipulation quirk with one for all? Hey guys, welcome back.
Changes
this is a
occur
story
in his
about
life
what if
when he
Izuku
finally
had a bone
awakens his own
manipulation
quirk
with one for all. Before we start,
Changes
thank you
occur
for
in
the
his
support
life
in the
when he
last
finally
video.
awakens
This
his
really
own
means a lot
quirk.
to me.
Don't
Before
forget
we start,
to subscribe
thank you
to
for the
this
support
channel
in the last
and to
video.
leave a like
This
in
really
this
means
video.
a lot to me.
And you can suggest a My Hero
Don't forget to
Academia
subscribe to this
fanfiction
channel
with a link in the
and
comments
to leave a like
if
in
you
this
want me
video.
to read it.
And you can
check the
suggest a My
description
Hero
for the creator of
Academia
this great
fanfiction
fanfic
with a link in the comments
for making
if you
this
want me to
fanfic.
read it.
So let's
and
start.
check the description for the creator of this
Chapter
great
3
fanfic
Heroic
and
Tests.
support them for making this fanfic. So let's start. Chapter 3 Heroic Tests. Testing Grounds Entrance. What's the matter? There's no such thing as a countdown in real battles. Run. Ruin. Time is being wasted. Present Mike shouted in amusement. Snapping out of their daze, the group of examinees made their way to the examination area. It took some time due to the scale of the testing grounds, but they eventually made it to the first intersection of the city. Only for them to be greeted by an unexpected sight of carnage and bones. The roads were cracked, burn marks can be seen, and of course the remains of robots were all over the place. The bots were either impaled on the walls by bones, blown to pieces, or simply crushed by some sort of force. Crash. Jumping from the sudden crash, everyone looked to the source and saw that a one-pointer bottom had crashed nearby, its body scattered into scrap as it left a sizable crater on the ground. As you can imagine, everyone had mixed feelings from the scene. Some were confused by what they are seeing, others felt a bit concerned as to not knowing who could have caused such damage in a short amount of time. While a few were focused on looking for bots that they could earn points from. And amongst the crowd, Ochako and Ida were looking for their friend, only to find that he wasn't among them. Thinking that he must have moved on, they decided to split off from the group. Snapping out of the moment, the rest of them scrambled to find bots as well. Earlier, Izuku was already a good block ahead of everyone else, and already came up with ways to scrap some bots. Reaching the intersection, he managed to find a good amount of bots. There were 15 bots in total, 8 2-pointers, 4 3-pointers and 3 1-pointers. If he managed to scrap them all, it would give a total of 31 points. Probably enough to pass, but he didn't plan on stopping there. Izuku formed 4 small gaster blasters and proceeded to vaporize 4 of the 2-pointers, gaining the attention of the other bots. "Come on boys, I've got bones to pick with you," the teen shouted in an amused tone. Not a second later, all eyes locked on him, and with a flash of red they declared target acquired. In an instant, 3 of the 1-pointers rolled up to Izuku on their big wheels, arms raised. Izuku responded by covering the 2 of them with a green glow and proceeded to lift them off the ground before smashing them against each other. Once the piles of scrap fell to the floor, Izuku grabbed the last 1-pointer and chucked it across the street. Not even bothering to check the results, Izuku saw the remaining bots make their way towards him. And without waiting for them to get close, Izuku sprouted bones from the ground, immediately piercing the 4 remaining 2-pointers. Leaving just the 4 3-pointers to fight Izuku. Summoning a bone club charged with 1 for all, he ran at the 4. Dodging a mechanical arm, Izuku teleported behind one of them and smashed his club against its head. Once destroyed, Izuku then jumped away from the short-circuiting bot and stared at the remaining 3. Charging 1 for all throughout his body, he then proceeded to lift one of them with his psychokinesis and throw it to the side of the building where bones were waiting to impale it. After making sure the bot was impaled, he turned to the 2 remaining bots, and with his hand raised he summoned bones in the air before bringing his hand down, causing the bones to rain down on one of the 3-pointers, effectively making it into a pincushion. Without turning around, he charged 1 for all through his right hand and proceeded to backhand the last 3-pointer that tried to attack him from behind. The latter was ripped into pieces from the sheer force of the hit, leaving it headless as its body fell to ground, twitching among its scattered pieces. "That's 31 points, but..." Izuku looked down on his hand with a somewhat unsatisfied expression. "Only 5%, huh?" During his training, Izuku had learned to channel one for all throughout his body, rather than just letting it flow through one point of his body. He felt a little bit down, but luckily for him All Might assured him that his training wasn't a waste. And eventually he will grow from 5% and possibly beyond that. Just the thought of being eventually stronger than All Might still baffled him. He was brought out of his thought when he heard something behind him. Turning around, he saw the one pointer he threw across the street earlier was slowly making its way towards him. "The story," it managed to say while sparking up a storm. Fully turned around, he stared at it with a casual look. "Huh. Guess that's what I get for not checking," he thought as he lifted his left hand and proceeded to lift the bot off the ground and throw it in the air. "Now it's 31 points, he chuckled to himself. As he was about to move, he heard Present Mike's voice. "What's the matter? There's no such thing as a countdown in real battles. Run. Ruin. Time is being wasted." "Looks like they're on the move now," Izuku thought with a grin before teleporting away to find more bots. Not a second later, the group of examinees arrived at the scene with wide eyes. In the observation room, the teachers of UA were watching several students destroy the robots with ease. While combat ability is important, they were searching for something more than that. Namely, certain qualities that made up a hero. "Well, it appears we have quite the batch this year," Midnight commented to her fellow heroes and proctors. Present Mike nodded. "Promising students indeed," he yelled as he saw a group students of destroy bots with ease. A man with scarves just grunted with a neutral face. I can tell that there's some troublesome ones as well," he said as his eyes landed on a blonde student with an explosion Quirk having a vicious grin on as he's surrounded by scrapped bots. He sighed as his eyes landed on a green-haired teen with hood on, surrounded by destroyed bots, causing him to raise an eyebrow from the teen's outfit choice. And some interesting ones as well. He knew looks aren't everything, but something about this one felt unique somehow. All Might in his real form was keeping an eye on one student in particular. The hero smiled as he saw Izuku not only destroy robots, but also took the time to help others who appeared to be in trouble. And from what he can see, cracking a few jokes along the way, making some examinees laugh a bit. "You've already passed my expectations, young Midoriya. I've truly made the right choice," All Might thought with a proud smile. "A fascinating bunch indeed," Principal Nizu said as he watched students destroy more robots with ease while others simply stood knowing that they passed. His eyes then landed on Izuku, who's been looking for more people to help or bots to scrap. "But we can't be sure yet." He reached for a big red button and pressed it. "The real test starts now." All Might chuckled softly as he watched the screen. "This should be interesting to see," he thought to himself in anticipation. Back in the testing grounds, Izuku let out a breath as he finished kicking a robot's head off. Looks like I have 71 points now," he thought as he looked around the examination area. He saw that most bots were destroyed and that other examinees were beginning to rest. "Welp, looks like I can take nap in the meantime," he said in a happy tone. But as he was about to find a place to nap, the ground suddenly shook, nearly throwing everyone to the ground. Everyone turned to one direction, and were all shocked at what they saw. Following their line of sight, Izuku saw what they were looking at and instantly felt his jaw dropping. "Ah crud," he thought in shock as he closed his mouth. Standing at the end of the street was the zero-pointer itself. The Goliath was as tall as a building, and could easily crush one with its hand. Speaking of hands, the robot raised its fist and brought it down, creating shockwaves that sent debris everywhere. Everyone turned around and started to run away, and with Izuku steadily following. "Why doesn't UA send that thing to fight villains?" Izuku screamed in his head as he turned around. Worse yet, someone might get killed if they don't dash. His thoughts were interrupted by a pained voice. Ow. Izuku froze and turned around to see Ochako with her feet caught in some rubble. She can only watch in horror as the robot raised its fist to crush her. As it came down, she can only close her eyes in tears as she waited for the impact to come. Crash. She felt a large crash around her but no impact. Understandably shocked, she fearfully opened her eyes, only for them to immediately widen in confusion, as she saw that the fish was being held back by bones. She uttered in confusion, as she looked around to see large bones stopping the massive fist from crushing her, some of which were beginning to crack from the pressure. She was about panic when Izuku appeared next to her, surprising her a bit. "Ochako, are you okay?" he asked in a concerned voice as he levitated the debris off her legs. The girl looked up a bit dazed and shocked but managed to answer. My ankle hurts," Ochako said while trying to fight through the pain. Hey Izuku, did you do dash?" She was about to ask if he did this, but was interrupted. "No time for that, we need to get you out of here," he said as he noticed the bones starting to give out. He quickly picked her up in his arms. "Hang on tight," he yelled before charging himself with one for all and running away from the robot's fist, just before the bones gave out, causing the fist to slam on the ground. While running, Izuku glanced at her ankle. Slight bruising, he thought as he stopped far enough from the 0-pointer. Only a few minutes left till the exam ends, but within that time the robot could still cause a lot of damage. He grimly thought as he glanced at the 0-pointer, while trying to think of a plan. If something isn't done, then this robot could hurt a lot people. His eyes narrowed at that thought. He was about to start running again when he saw someone he recognized. Ida. The taller teen whipped his head with a surprised look on his face. "Midoriya, are you and your friend all right?" he yelled as he made his way towards them. "Her ankle is a bit bruised, but otherwise we're both fine," Ida nodded at his statement as he continued. "For now I'm trusting you to keep an eye on her," Izuku said as he handed the dizzy Ochako to Ida. Izuku figured that since Ida had a speed quirk, he can take her somewhere safe in a quick pace. Ida was caught off guard when Izuku pushed Ochako into his arms. "Wait. What about you?" he asked, worrying that Izuku was about to do something risky. Which of course he was. Izuku grinned and turned around with his hands in his pockets facing the giant robot. There are only a few minutes left until the exam ends, but by that time someone could get hurt from the robot's rampage. Or worse, killed, he said seriously. "Then what's the plan?" Ida asked with a confused face along with Ochako, who recovered from the speedy trip. "BNHAOST, you say run plays." While sporting a big grin, Izuku glanced back with his eyes glowing. "Simple, I'm going to scrap that tin can," he stated with a shrug. "What?" the two yelled in shock. "Midoriya, you can't take that 0-pointer on, it's too risky," Ida yelled. But before he and Ochako could argue further, Izuku summoned 3 medium-sized Gaster blasters, surprising the two. And with glowing eyes and a smile, he looked to them. "A hero is supposed to protect others in need, and as long as I can, then I won't hesitate to do just that." With that, he gestured the 3 blasters to start attacking the 0-pointer on all sides, effectively damaging and distracting it. Author's note: imagine the turrets from the Cubili from Gundam. That's how the blasters move while attacking the 0-pointer. He then summoned a bone spear and charged at the 0-pointer, leaving the two teens speechless. In the observation room. "Truly fascinating," the principal said as he observed Izuku take on the 0-pointer with an intrigued expression. Meanwhile, the teachers who didn't encounter Izuku before could only stare with wide eyes at what the young man was doing. "What the heck?" Present Mike yelled, clearly not expecting to see that. "Well, you don't see that every day," thought the man with scarves, looking genuinely surprised by the teen's ability. "I had a feeling something was up, but not this," he thought as he kept observing the teen. Not noticing that All Might saw his reaction. The latter could only grin at this. This particular hero teacher was one of the tougher ones at UA. The fact that Izuku was able to catch him off guard spoke volumes of the impression he made. It also helps that the other teachers couldn't help but be fascinated with the teen's abilities. The number 1 hero turned back to the screen to see what Izuku would do to defeat the 0-pointer. Back in the testing grounds. As Izuku ran, he sprouted a large bone below him and launched himself in the air. Once in the air, he threw the bone spear at one of Robot's eyes, puncturing it in the process. Not missing a beat, he then teleported to a nearby roof of a building to assess the situation. It looks like everyone is far away from the bot, Izuku thought as the glow in his eyes intensified and green electricity bounced around his body. Which means I can go all out, he thought with a grin as he formed a spiral of bones and spun them around him, while at the same time making sure the blasters had the Goliath occupied. With a wave of his hand, the spiral shot towards the robot, while he called back the Gaster blasters and quickly formed a larger one underneath him, allowing him to rise in the air. Once the bone barrage ended, the massive robot was noticeably damaged. It began looking around while one of its eyes were heavily damaged, exposing its insides, most likely a result from the assault earlier. Its remaining eyes landed on a grinning Izuku, who was on top of a fully charged Gaster blaster ready to fire. With a thrust of his hand, the blaster fired, sending an energy beam to the robot's chest. ZWOOSSSHHH. The beam made contact and managed to punch through the robot's back, leaving a massive hole. The bot staggered back, looking ready to shut off at any moment. Now for the combo breaker, Izuku thought as he teleported in the air, making the blaster disappear. Now positioned above the robot, he charged a large amount of one for all throughout his body, and reared his fist back while falling towards the robot. Always wanted to do this, he thought with an excited grin. The robot and everyone else below looked up to see Izuku falling, and with a mighty roar he yelled, "Smosh!" Izuku felt the impact to his arm for a moment, then looked up to see what he did. The robot's head had a noticeable dent on its face as its body began sparking. Mini explosions started to erupt from the robot, until eventually a bigger explosion erupted from the robot's head, catching Izuku off guard. The sudden explosion sent Izuku tumbling back in the air. Meanwhile, everyone was staring at the power he possessed with shock and awe. They didn't even bother walking away as the robot kept falling backwards. Amongst the crowd, Ida and Ochako were staring at their friend in worry as he continued to tumble in the air. They were about to make a beeline towards Izuku, who was not there. Song ends. They stopped moving and then begun frantically looking for Izuku. Each second passed only increased their worry. Others around them also begun looking for him as well, seeing as there was no sign of him. Do you see him?" Ochako asked Ida, barely able to hold back her tears at the thought of their friend being seriously hurt or worse. I don't see him," Ida said with worry evident in his voice. I should have stopped him, but this was the choice he made," he thought as he kept looking around for any sign of him. Though he couldn't help but feel guilty considering that he could have done something more. They were interrupted by a voice from behind. "So, what are you guys looking for?" Due to their focus on searching for their friend, they didn't bother turning around to see who it was. "We're looking for a good friend of ours," Ida responded, with Ochako nodding furiously without turning around. "Aw shucks, well I'm sure he'll be happy to hear that you guys think of him that way," the voice said in amusement. The two were about to chastise the man for not taking the situation seriously, only to stop when they saw that standing in front of them was Izuku with a teasing grin on his face and hands in his pockets. His clothes are a bit burned with some tearing, most likely from the debris or shrapnel that came from the explosion. Everyone else that looked in their direction were also surprised to see him as well. "So, did I miss something?" Izuku asked jokingly to try and lighten up the mood, only to immediately chuckle fondly as he was brought into a group hug. They then both began scolding him for doing something so careless. While looking a bit sheepish, Izuku laughed a bit. All right, we all know how dangerous that was. But seriously, it would have ended up badly if anyone else besides me got hurt." They wanted to argue, but he did have a point. In the end, there was no serious injuries other than him being slightly burned. "Now then," Izuku turned towards Ochako. "How's that ankle treating ya?" he asked in a tone of concern while keeping his eyes on the Ling in question. "My ankle hurts a bit, but I think we should focus more on you, Izuku," Ochako stated while slightly caught off guard by her friend's concern for others rather than himself. He waved her off gently. Nah, besides having a few cuts and bruises and having the need to take a nap, it's nothing serious, he stated nonchalantly, which made his friends deadpan at him. I'm glad you're okay, Ida stated warmly before making his expression more stern. But it was still foolish to fight the 0-pointer alone, he stated seriously, making Izuku look sheepish. However, seeing you do it to save others was inspiring. He stated proudly while moving his arms, making the other two laugh. Izuku smiled as he rubbed the back of his head. Well, it did look messy, but it worked out in the end. Besides, if it did end up becoming worse, I knew you two would pull through, he said cheerfully. Ochako gave a thumbs up as Ida gave a salute. I was happy to help you, even if I didn't do much, Ida said. Izuku was about to say something until Present Mike's voice was suddenly heard. The test is over. Present Mike screamed so loud everyone in the mock city jolted in surprise. Izuku gave a sigh as he looked at the other teens. How many points did you guys get? He asked his two friends. Ochako shakily raised her hand. 28, she said in a shaky voice as she tried not to throw up from overusing her quirk earlier. 52. Ida shouted in a proud voice. Izuku nodded with a smile as he pointed to himself. I got 71 at least, he said, making the other two go wide-eyed. At least. They both said in shock at their friend's power. Even more shocked considering that amount of skill that he must possess. Okay, make way, an elderly voice said, making the three turn, only to see Recovery Girl making her way towards them. Is anyone hurt? She asked towards the three. Izuku just shrugged with a grin. I got some light burns and some scratches, but nothing serious, he stated calmly, while Ida shook his head negatively at the question. Ochako raised her hand. I hurt my ankle, she announced with a wince. Recovery Girl approached Ochako to inspect the ankle. Afterwards she looked to Ochako with a kind smile. Don't worry dearie, it's nothing serious, she announced calmly, making the three sigh in relief. Now allow me to take care of the dearie, the old woman said as she knelt down and kissed her ankle. Everyone was shocked except for Izuku, who began laughing at their expressions. I can relate, the first time Izuku saw her quirk in work, he swore that he nearly fainted from shock. Before anyone could say anything, Onglo covered Ochako's ankle, completely healing it before their eyes. Ochako then stood on her feet with a shocked expression. Whoa, it feels completely healed now, she said in a happy tone, but she then began hunching over. But I feel a bit tired now, she said softly. Izuku decided to pitch in and put their confusion at ease. That's just a normal side effect to Recovery Girl's quirk, Izuku said, gaining everyone's attention. Her quirk allows her to speed up anyone's recovery speed, allowing them to heal something that would take weeks or even months to heal in a matter of seconds. Everyone who heard was in awe of her quirk. Recovery Girl gave a small laugh at Izuku. Always the fanboy, aren't you? Izuku then blushed a bit, earning a laugh from everyone. Here, have a gummy, she said as she placed the gummy on Izuku's hand. Now let me heal you, Sonny, she said before kissing Izuku's cheek. A glow covered the teen's body as he began to heal. Wow, I wish I could do that, Izuku said with amazement before bowing to Recovery Girl. Thank you, Recovery Girl, he then raised his head with a sheepish expression as he held out a notebook from his hoodie. If you wouldn't mind, would you sign my autograph book? Izuku requested shyly. I mean, I never got the chance before, so I might as well do it now, he thought to himself. The elderly woman gave a soft laugh as she grabbed a pen and wrote on a blank page. It's not every day someone asked an old lady like me for an autograph, she said as she finished and returned to Izuku, who graciously accepted it. He then turned to the healing hero. I'll be surprised if no one did. Healing heroes are always appreciated for what they do, he said earnestly, causing some students to voice their agreements. The elderly woman felt touched by this statement and the praise from the other examinees. Well, I better not let anyone down then, she then turned to the crowd. Is there anyone else injured? she called as she started to make her way to the other students. As they begun leaving the examination area, Izuku couldn't help but hear what some people in the crowd were saying. Holy shit, did you see that? A better question to ask would be, who didn't see it? That kid's a monster, thankfully he's on our side. He summoned freaking cannons. They were like swoosh. And then boom. As they reached the exit, Izuku couldn't help but blush from what he heard. It didn't take a genius to figure out who or what they were talking about. When asked by his friends why he resembled a tomato, he simply said that he was feeling tired. Outside the UA grounds. After everyone gathered their things, Ida, Ochako, and Izuku walked out of the UA exam building wearing their middle school outfits. Wow, it's finally over, Ochako said while she stretched her arms. Yes, today was quite the experience, Ida said while moving his hand as he talked. Yep, but we made it through, Izuku said with a satisfied expression. And with the points we got, I'm sure we got in, he said with a smile. Fucking finally. The three turned around to see a certain blonde teen walking up to them with a scowl. Izuku gave him a grin as he approached. Good to see you, sunshine, he said with a laugh, surprising his two companions. Fuck off, Deku. Bakugo growled as he stood in front of them. Enjoying the response, Izuku continued. So how did your test go? Though he had a feeling that he knew the answer. The blonde grinned while he cracked his knuckles. What do you think, he said sarcastically. Those metalheads didn't stand a fucking chance. He then walked past the two confused teens and walked right up to Izuku, who just kept staring with a grin. What about you? Izuku just shrugged. Things went well and I managed to help others along the way. He then turned towards his two companions who were still watching the duo's interesting exchange. Plus, I made some new friends along the way, he said, making the two smile, while Bakugo just rolled his eyes with a groan. Chuckling at the blonde teen's expression, Izuku added. Well, we better get going, it's getting dark out. With that, the four started making their way towards home. Along the way, Ochako saw her chance and decided to ask Izuku, she said, gaining everyone's attention while the teen in question just hummed, indicating that he was listening. Why does Bakugo call you Deku? She said, not realizing her mistake. Izuku instantly doubled down in laughter while clutching his stomach. As for Bakugo, he looked like he would kill her in her sleep, getting confused and fearful looks from the two. First of. Izuku trailed off as he began laughing again, which of course caused Bakugo to form a face that could end the world. Izuku coughed before continuing with a big grin. His name is Bakugo, his correction earned an embarrassed and apologetic look from Ochako. To which Bakugo just grunted, indicating that it was fine. Or at least in his language. Secondly, he calls me Deku, because when we were four it was an insult that he came up with. It means someone who can't do or won't achieve anything. He said with a shrug, while Bakugo looked down at his feet for a bit. I see, an insult when written with a different kanji, Ida said with a hand on his chin. Izuku then waved his hand. Yeah, but it's cool, nowadays it's pretty much a nickname. He then turned to Bakugo, making the blonde teen look up with a scowl. Like how I call him Kaken Dot. He said with a grin, making the blonde teen smirk. Really? Ochako said while tilting her head, gaining everyone's attention. I thought Deku means never give up or you can do it, since it sounds like the short version of Dikairu, she said with a smile. Making the two stop and think for a bit. Izuku then looked to Ochako with a smile. Huh. Never really thought of it that way. Thanks, Ochako, he said in a grateful tone, making her smile. So, she began gaining Izuku's attention. To make it official, can I call you Deku? She asked with a hopeful look on her face. Izuku merely smiled at the question. Sure thing, he said with a cheery tone and turned towards Ida. What about you, Ida? He asked, only for Ida to shake his head. No, I believe calling you Izuku or Midoriya is good enough, he said with a slight bow. Well, as of now, Deku has a new meaning. Izuku said in a cheerful tone while Ochako and Ida voiced their support. Fan. Fucking. Tastic. Bakugo shouted, gaining everyone's attention. Are we done with this friendship bullshit? He said, making Ida and Ochako deadpan at him while Izuku could tell that he was enjoying the moment. In his own Bakugo way, that is. Deciding to have fun, Izuku spoke. Oh, come on, Kaken. Gaining the grumpy blonde's attention. If you had friends like mine, you'd be the luckiest guy in the world. He stated with a grin, making Bakugo's eye twitch while the other two laughed at the duo's interaction. I hate you, Bakugo said with a growl after a while, before marching ahead, making Izuku laugh. I know, bud, Izuku laughed, seeing Bakugo looking like a ticking time bomb. They were about to split up when suddenly Izuku got their attention. You guys want to exchange numbers? We can talk to each other if we have the time, Ochako and Ida immediately agreed, while Bakugo just scoffed and started walking away. I don't need their fucking numbers, was the last thing they heard as he turned the corner, making his way home. The two turned to Izuku expectantly, and without missing a beat he clarified. Oh, what he means is, if I need their numbers, I'll just ask Deku if I want it. That seemed to clear their confusion, making them chuckle at the translation. With that, the three parted ways, eager to hear from UA. 1 week later. A week had passed, but for Izuku it was in a flash, and almost nothing interesting happened. Izuku kept in touch with his friends, mostly talking about random topics, and how they were eager to get the results. When he had the chance, Izuku tried contacting All Might, but the hero seemed to be missing his calls. During his free time he kept training both his quirk and body in the hopes of improving his skills. Not only that, he hoped to increase his stamina and overall energy. Currently Izuku was meditating while channeling one for all throughout his body and forming weapons at the same time. All the while, Temi was asleep, being used to her owner's weirdness. Opening his eyes, he was about freshen up when his mom burst through the door with a letter in her hands. Izuku. Inko called out to her son in a tone of nervousness and excitement. It's here, honey. She then handed the letter to Izuku, who slowly took the letter from her hands and looked it over, feeling it weigh like a ton in his hands. Izuku looked to his mother and saw she was giving him a smile, though it was a nervous one. I believe in you, sweetie, she said before leaving the room and closing the door behind her, giving her son some privacy. Izuku walked to his workbench and sat down. He stared at his letter for a moment before eventually ripping it open. I am here. As a projection. All Might. Izuku couldn't help but yell in shock at the sudden appearance. First of, I'm sorry for not being able to contact you sooner. There were some things that needed to be sorted out, so sorry about that, the pro said with a bow before grinning at the camera. But not to worry, we'll be seeing each other more since I'll be teaching at UA now. Izuku was shocked, but as he thought about it, it made sense since he was a veteran hero with a whole bunch of experience. Now let's talk about your scores. You did excellent in the written test, coming in at the top 2. He said, making Izuku smile. He'd studied everything that might be relevant on the test. It also helped that, well, as stated before, he's a nerd. Now on to points. During the practical you managed to destroy numerous bots with your skills, giving you 71 villain points. The teen already knew this, but it still felt good regardless. But wait, there's more than that. The hero yelled with a voice laced with pride. Knowing you, you probably suspected that there was more than just villain points. He said as he pointed to a screen behind him. The screen came to life and showed Izuku not only destroying bots, but also helping other people during the exam. Despite being a competition, you still went out of your way to help people as best you could. Your actions showed the essence of being a true hero, and how could we not reward that? All Might said with a proud look on his face. The judges were looking for more than just scrapped robots. They were looking for what it means to be hero. Therefore the exam also gave rescue points. You, young Midoriya, have earned over 80 rescue points, adding up to a total of 151 points. bringing you all the way to first place in the entrance exam. Izuku's jaw practically dropped. He knew he helped some people out during the exam, but he didn't expect that much. Must have helped a lot more people than I thought, and maybe bringing down that 0-pointer helped. All Might then faced the camera with an open hand and said, "Congratulations Izuku Midoriya, UA is now your Hero Academia." The transmission then ended. Izuku felt so much joy at this very moment. "I made it!" Izuku shouted with joy as he picked up Temi and begun spinning her around, the latter mewling in surprise and happiness for her owner. Suddenly, the small device played an audio message. "This message will now self-destruct. OSH. Boom." Izuku then exited his room with Temi in his arms, both covered in soothe. "Izuku, are you okay?" Inko yelled in worry as she came rushing to her soothe-covered family members. Coughing a bit, Izuku waved his hand. The device in the letter just exploded, gaining a look of worry from her. But, while putting Temi down gently, he then gave her a big hug. "I got in." "You got in?" Inko said in amazement as she eagerly returned the hug with tears in her eyes. After the mini-celebration, Izuku's phone rang with messages from his friends, stating that they all got in as well and congratulated Izuku for his first place. Bakugo stated that he would eventually take the top spot. But Izuku knew there was a congratulation message in there, somewhere. He thinks. First day in UA. In a blink of an eye, the hero in training was tying his red boots on the front door of his home. Today was the first day of class. He didn't know where his friends' classes were, but he hoped that they were joining him in Class 1A. Izuku. The teen looked back to see both his mom and Temi in her arms, seeing him leave. Inko smiled at her son as she felt tears in her eyes. "You're mega cool right now," she said while Temi mewled in happiness. Izuku smiled at them as he opened the door. "See you soon, you two," he said before he walked out and make his way to UA. UA hallways. 1A, where is it?" Izuku muttered as he rushed down the hallway. After a few minutes of searching, Izuku finally found the 1A classroom door. It was massive door, easily being twice as Izuku's height and nearly 3 times long as his shoulders. "Must be for people of all sizes," Izuku said with a shrug as he started opening the door. "Now let's see what we're dealing with," Izuku thought as he opened the door, only to laugh at what he saw. "This'll be fun." There, sitting in the front row, was Bakugo arguing with Ida. The two clearly arguing about Bakugo's feet on his desk. "Don't put your legs on the desk. Don't you think that's disrespectful towards your classmates?" "Frankly, I don't give a fuck. Which middle school are you from anyway?" "I went to Sumai Academy." "Sumai?" Katsuki's feet fell from his desk as he leaned forward. "Get that elitist shit out of my face, 4 eyes." Shocking Ida and making the teen take a few steps back. For a few seconds the two stopped their arguing as they saw Izuku standing at the door with a grin on his face. With a smile on his face, Ida made his way to Izuku. "Izuku, looks like we'll be in the same class," he said as he extended a hand towards Izuku. Izuku smiled as he shook his hand. "I'll be looking forward to it." He then turned to Bakugo, who gave him a smirk, making Izuku grin. "So you're here too, Deku," the explosive teen stated with no surprise in his voice. "Aha, morning to you too, sunshine," Izuku said with a laugh that immediately made Bakugo's blood boil. "Fuck off," Bakugo roared back in fury. Izuku just chuckled, and with a smile he said sorry, couldn't resist, earning a grunt from the blonde telling Izuku that there's no hard feelings. Meanwhile, everyone except for Ida was just flabbergasted by the duo's exchange. Well, all except a red-haired teen who was enjoying this manly exchange. He then noticed that all eyes were on him, making him blush a bit. "Sheesh, can't a guy just say good morning?" he thought as he looked around the room in embarrassment. "Hey, you guys are here too." The three turned to see Ochako standing behind Izuku with a smile on her face. Izuku and Ida gave her a smile while Bakugo just grunted. Meanwhile, the class just went back to their usual thing, having conversations with each other. Izuku then turned towards his class, studying them a bit. From what he can see, his fellow classmates had all kinds of quirks. Emitters, transformation and mutant-type quirks. Quite the variety here, but I can tell we'll get along just fine, he happily thought to himself. He then noticed a short teen with a dark purple orbs on his head, giving a lecherous gaze towards a girl with a ponytail, making her uncomfortable for unknown reasons. Well, hopefully. Izuku thought with a deadpan expression. Looking around, something caught Izuku's eyes, or rather, someone. There, conversing with a red-haired teen, was Pink Teen, with fluffy hair, with 2 horns sticking out of her head. She glanced behind her, talking to another classmate, giving Izuku a good view of her eyes. Oh God, her eyes, he couldn't help but be entranced by them. Dark as the void, however, in the center of it, her irises act like a shining light within it. Ochako noticed that her friend stopped moving, and looked at his face. Only to see that he was in some sort of trance, confusing her. Following his gaze, her eyes landed on a pink-colored teen. Then she looked at Izuku, then at the teen, and then Izuku again. Her gears started turning. After connecting the dots, a sly grin appeared on her face. Ah, someone's in love. She squealed in her head. She then nudged Izuku, snapping him out of it. Ha! What happened? Izuku jolted before turning to Ochako, who had a huge knowing grin on her face. Realizing that he'd been caught, his face turned red, making her laugh. She then leaned in to whisper, "Don't worry, I'll keep it to myself," she said genuinely. Turning his head, he saw a kind smile on his friend's face. Though red-faced, he gave a shaky nod and an embarrassed smile. While Ida and Bakugo remained clueless. Bakugo was about to ask what was up when someone interrupted him. "If you're here to hunt for friendship, then I suggest you leave." The 4 turned around to see something interesting. Down on the floor was a shaggy-looking man inside a yellow sleeping bag, looking like a caterpillar. Who is this guy? Were the collective thoughts of everyone in class as Izuku and his friends made their way to their desk. All the while, Izuku was keeping an eye on the man as he moved to his desk while still in his sleeping bag. It took you a few seconds to quiet down, good," the man said as he took off his sleeping bag. Izuku rubbed his chin, feeling like he recognized him due to the scarves around the man's neck. "I'm your homeroom teacher, Shoyuta Aizawa. Pleasure to meet you," he said in a tired tone. That instantly made Izuku connect the dots. The hero fan remembered that name. Aizawa, also known as the underground hero Eraserhead. Izuku could only stare at awe in seeing the man in person. From what he knew, Eraserhead was said to be one of the best hand-to-hand fighters in all of Japan. Not only that, he was responsible for taking down shady operations done by villains in the shadows. His quirk was Eraser, which allowed him to erase the effects of anyone using their quirks as long as they were in his sights. Except for mutation types, of course. Izuku was suddenly out his thoughts when Aizawa pulled out a PE uniform from his sleeping bag. "Wear these immediately. And then head to the P.E grounds," he said as he passed uniforms to everybody. Not wasting any time, they went to their respective locker rooms to change, though admittedly confused by this sudden notion. UAPE grounds. Outside, everyone stood at the PE ground wearing their uniforms. A quirk apprehension test. Everyone yelled in confusion. What about the ceremony? And the guidance counselor's meeting? Ochako called with worry on her face. "If you want to be heroes, we don't have time for that," the hero said without glancing at Ochako. "You all understand the school's reputation for freedom on campus. Well, that freedom goes for us teachers too," he said, making everyone scared. Aizawa then explained that the tests are based on sporting tests. Only this time they would have to use their quirks the best they could in order to gain a higher score. "Bakugo," the teacher said, getting the teen's attention. "How far could you pitch a softball in middle school?" The blonde replied 67 meters. Aizawa tossed a softball to Bakugo. Now try using your quirk this time around. As long as you don't exit the circle, anything you do is fine, he said as Bakugo walked into the circle. Don't hold back. Got it, Bakugo gladly replied with a feral grin as he started winding up his arm. Just as the ball was leaving Bakugo's hand, the blonde set off a huge explosion that sent the ball flying. But not without him screaming. Dai! The blonde screamed at the top of his lungs before launching the ball sky high. Pfft, Dai? Izuku thought with an eye roll but chuckled. After a few moments the device on Aizawa's hand beeped. Before anything else, one must know what they're capable of. The pro hero then showed Bakugo's score of 705.2 m. This is a rational metric that will form the basis of being hero. Whoa, that insane. 705 meters, that's unreal. So manly. This looks fun. The pink-skinned teen said in a cheery tone, making Izuku smile as well. The other students also voiced their excitement. Until Aizawa spoke again. It looks fun, you say? The pro hero said in a cold tone. And just like that, the atmosphere changed. Izuku suddenly felt dread at the pro's voice. He could have sworn that he nearly summoned his bones on instinct. The next words that he said sent chills to everyone's spine. How about this? If anyone has a low score here, then they'll be instantly expelled, said the pro in a threatening manner. Eraserhead then pulled his hair back, revealing a mad grin on his face. Welcome to the Department of Heroics.